The morning sky above New York turned purple without warning. Sarah Chen was drinking her coffee when the color drained from the world, replaced by something that made her stomach twist. She was a general, trained for the impossible, but nothing had prepared her for this. The purple spread across every major city on Earth at the same moment. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Cairo, all of them watched their skies change color like someone had flipped a switch. Then the voice came. It spoke in every language at once, somehow understood by every person who heard it. Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. The voice belonged to something that appeared in the sky above each city. It looked like a crystal spider the size of a building, made of light and sharp edges. Its name was Kethvar, though no human knew that yet. It was an ambassador, though its idea of diplomacy was different from anything humans understood. We are the hegemony. We have ruled this galaxy for longer than your species has existed. We come with an offer. President Maria Santos was in the White House Situation Room within minutes. Leaders from around the world appeared on screens, all asking the same question. What did these things want? Kethvar continued speaking, its voice calm and certain. Your planet will join our empire. You will pay tribute. You will accept our governor. You will follow our laws. In return, we will allow your species to continue existing. The crystal being paused, as if waiting for applause that never came. This offer has been accepted by every intelligent species we have encountered. It is generous. It is final. You have one rotation of your planet to decide. Then the purple sky returned to blue, and the crystal beings vanished. The world exploded into chaos. Every news channel, every radio station, every internet forum buzzed with the same topic. Aliens were real. They wanted Earth to surrender. They had given humanity 24 hours to decide. Dr. James Wright was one of the few people not panicking. As Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien contact, he had spent years thinking about this moment. But his theories had never included anything like this. He was rushed to the emergency United Nations session in New York. What do we know about them? Santos asked during the video conference. Nothing good, Wright replied, pulling up data on his laptop. I've been monitoring radio signals since they appeared. They're not just talking to us, they're talking to each other, and I've been trying to decode their communications. He showed them patterns of light and sound that meant nothing to most people in the room, but Wright had been studying alien communication theory for 15 years. From what I can understand, this isn't their first time doing this. They've done this before, to other planets, other species, and from what I can tell, he paused, his face going pale. The species that said yes don't exist anymore, not as they were. General Chen leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean they become slaves, workers. Their populations get reduced. Their cultures disappear. The hegemony doesn't want partners. They want servants. The room went quiet. Outside, protests filled the streets of every major city. Some people demanded immediate surrender to save human lives. Others called for resistance no matter the cost. And the species that said no? Santos asked, though she already knew the answer. They got wiped out, Wright said simply. Completely. No survivors, no trace they ever existed. The hegemony calls it standard pacification protocols. For the next 18 hours, Earth's leaders debated humanity's future. Military commanders ran scenarios that all ended badly. Earth's weapons were primitive compared to beings who traveled between stars. Humanity had nuclear weapons, fighter jets, and aircraft carriers. The aliens had technology that could change the color of the sky across an entire planet at once. But something strange happened during those 18 hours. Instead of falling apart, humanity started coming together. Countries that had been enemies for decades began sharing resources. Military forces that had never cooperated started making joint plans. It wasn't organized by any government. It just happened, like a survival instinct kicking in. Sarah Chen found herself in charge of coordinating global military response. She knew it was hopeless from a tactical standpoint. But she also knew something the aliens might not understand about humans. They got stubborn when cornered. "We can't win a direct fight," she told the assembled commanders. "But maybe we don't have to. Maybe we just have to make it cost more than they want to pay." Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist from Mexico, raised a point that changed everything. What if we're thinking about this wrong? They gave us a day to decide, but they also revealed they exist. Why do that if they were just going to destroy us anyway? Wright nodded slowly. She's right. This is psychological warfare. They want us to surrender because fighting costs them resources, ships, soldiers, time. If every species just gives up, conquest is cheap. 6 hours before the deadline, Santos made the call that would define humanity's future. She gathered every available camera and broadcast to the world. People of Earth. We have been given a choice between freedom and slavery disguised as protection. We have been told to submit or die, but there is a third option they haven't considered. She paused, looking directly into the camera. We fight. Not because we can win easily, but because some things are worth fighting for. Our children deserve to grow up free. Our cultures deserve to survive. Our species deserves to determine its own future. The response was immediate. Every major city that had seen protests now saw something else. Preparation. People who had never held weapons started learning. Engineers who had built cars and computers started thinking about building other things. Scientists who had studied peaceful applications of technology started considering violent ones. When the 24 hours ended, Kethvar returned. The crystal being appeared in the sky above the United Nations building in New York, where representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered. "Have you reached a decision?" it asked. Santos stood at the podium, surrounded by leaders from every continent. Her voice was steady, broadcast to every corner of the globe. "We have. We appreciate your offer, but humanity respectfully declines. We'll make our own way among the stars." The silence stretched for long seconds. When Kethvar spoke again, its voice carried something humans had never heard from it before. Surprise. No species has ever refused the hegemony twice. You will not. Be the first. We're not refusing twice, Santos replied. We're refusing once, completely. Earth is not for sale, not for rent, and not available for conquest. We suggest you find somewhere else to expand your empire. Kethvar's crystal form seemed to shift and sharpen. You do not understand what you have chosen. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have eliminated species far more advanced than yours. Your weapons are primitive. Your technology is crude. You cannot survive what comes next. Sarah Chen stepped forward. Maybe not, but we're going to try anyway. And if we go down, we're taking as many of you with us as possible. The crystal being made a sound like breaking glass. So be it. You have chosen extinction. The hegemony will return, and when we do, there will be no second offer, no mercy, no survivors. The purple sky returned for just a moment, and then Kethvar was gone. In the silence that followed, President Santos spoke one last time to the world. They think they know us. They think we're like every other species they've conquered. They're about to learn they're wrong. Humanity didn't start this fight, but we're going to finish it. Around the world, 7 billion people began preparing for war. 6 months later, the sky burned. Sarah Chen watched from her underground command center as orbital bombardment turned Chicago into a crater. The screens showed the same scene repeated across the globe, massive alien ships dropping fire from space, turning humanity's greatest cities into ash and melted steel. The hegemony had returned with 847 ships. Earth's combined navies, air forces, and space assets had lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes against them. Casualty reports coming in, her aide reported. his voice cracking. "London is gone. So are Mumbai, Lagos, and Sao Paulo. We estimate 3 billion dead in the first week." Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression was stone. "And the resistance networks?" "Operational. Most of our underground facilities survived. The mountain complexes are intact. We still have approximately 200 million people in secured locations. The hegemony had expected humanity to surrender after the first day of bombardment. Every other species had. But something happened that Commander Vexthai, the alien military leader, had never seen before in 3 centuries of conquest. Humanity got angrier. While cities burned above ground, the survivors dug deeper. The mountain facilities that had been built during Earth's Cold War became centers of desperate innovation. Underground factories that had once made consumer goods retooled to make weapons. Scientists who had spent their careers building peaceful technology turned their minds to war. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been a quantum physicist before the invasion. Now she led Project Prometheus in a facility carved out of solid rock beneath the Rocky Mountains. Her team was trying to reverse engineer hegemony technology from the wreckage of shot-down alien ships. "Look at this," she said to her team, pointing at the twisted remains of an alien weapon. Their energy source is based on controlled quantum decay. It's actually less efficient than our fusion reactors, but they've miniaturized it better. Her assistant, Dr. Kim Park, looked up from his microscope. "Their hull material is interesting too. It's not stronger than our best composites, just lighter. We could replicate this if we had the manufacturing capacity." "Then we build the manufacturing capacity," Vasquez said simply. "We have 200 million angry humans with nothing left to lose. Let's put them to work." Above ground, the hegemony occupation forces were discovering something that didn't appear in their conquest manuals. Humans didn't behave like other species. When cornered, most intelligent life forms either surrendered or fled. Humans did something else entirely. They fought back in ways that made no tactical sense. Commander Vexthai received reports that confused him. Human survivors were using primitive chemical explosives to destroy hegemony supply depots, even when the attacks were obviously suicidal. They were coordinating attacks across continents using communication methods the hegemony couldn't intercept. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to consider dying in battle an acceptable outcome. "This is unprecedented," he reported to the Hegemony Council. "These humans sacrifice themselves to destroy our assets. They fight without hope of victory. They do not behave according to standard conquest models." The Council's response was predictable. Apply more pressure until they break. But humanity wasn't breaking. It was adapting. Captain Lisa Torres had been a cargo ship pilot before the invasion. Now she commanded a converted freighter called the Defiance, retrofitted with weapons salvaged from alien wreckage and human ingenuity. Her crew of 30 included former teachers, mechanics, and accountants who had learned to fight because there was no choice. "Target identified," her navigator called out. "Hegemony Command Station, geosynchronous orbit above North America." Torres looked at the massive alien structure on her screen. It was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could sterilize continents. Taking it out would require getting close enough to deliver their improvised nuclear warhead. Getting close. Enough meant dying. "All hands, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "We all know how this ends, but that thing up there is coordinating the bombardment that's killing our people. If we take it out, we buy Earth some time." She paused, thinking of her daughter who had died in the bombing of Seattle. Humanity didn't start this war, but we're going to finish it. Today we take the first real step toward doing that. The Defiance's engines roared to life, pushing the converted freighter toward the alien station. Behind them, 3 other human ships followed the same desperate course. Only one would need to succeed. The hegemony defenders opened fire as soon as the human ships entered range. The first ship, the Phoenix, exploded in a ball of plasma. The second, the Revenge, made it halfway before its hull cracked and atmosphere vented into space. The third ship, the Liberty, managed to ram the station's outer ring before its nuclear payload detonated. The explosion took out the station's communication array but left the main structure intact. That left the Defiance. Torres felt her ship shudder as alien weapons tore through the hull. Half her crew was dead, the engines were failing, and life support was gone. But they were close enough. "Elena, are you getting this?" she said into her radio, broadcasting to the underground facilities. "Tell them we made it count." The Defiance's nuclear warhead was bigger than the others, cobbled together from 3 submarine missiles. When it detonated inside the Hegemony command station, the explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun. 2 days later, the effects became clear. Without coordination from the command station, the Hegemony bombardment became scattered and ineffective. Their ground forces, cut off from orbital support, found themselves facing human guerrilla attacks they couldn't predict or counter. But the real change was psychological. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had struck back successfully. The footage of the command station's destruction spread through the resistance networks, carrying a message more powerful than any weapon. Dr. Vasquez received the message 3 days after Torres's sacrifice. It was transmitted on frequencies the Hegemony couldn't detect, using quantum encryption methods her team had developed from studying alien communication systems. "This is General Chen. All resistance cells, all research facilities, all survivors. The enemy can bleed. Captain Torres and her crew proved that. Now we prove it again and again until they wish they'd never heard of humanity." The message continued. "I want every physicist working on alien technology, every engineer designing new weapons, every soldier planning attacks. The Hegemony thinks they're fighting primitives with chemical rockets and metal bullets. They're about to learn what happens when you give humans something to reverse engineer and a really good reason to improve on it." In her mountain laboratory, Vasquez looked at her latest project. It was a human-built energy weapon based on Hegemony technology, but smaller, more efficient, and powered by compact fusion cells her team had developed. Next to it lay the prototype for something even more ambitious, a jump-drive engine that could move ships faster than light. "How long until we can build ships equipped with these?" Chen asked during their secure video call. 6 months for the weapons," Vasquez replied. "A year for the jump drives. But General, we're not just copying their technology. We're improving it. Human creativity combined with alien science is producing things I don't think they've ever seen before." Chen smiled for the first time since the invasion began. "Good. They wanted to see what humanity is capable of when pushed to the edge. Let's show them." Above ground, Commander Vexthai was filing another confused report with the Hegemony Council. Human resistance was increasing, not decreasing. Their technology was advancing at an impossible rate. Most disturbing of all, intercepted human communications suggested they were building something big. "Recommend immediate deployment of core fleet elements," he concluded. "These humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not break under pressure. They adapt." The Council's response was swift. Overwhelming force would be applied until humanity surrendered or was extinct. They had no idea that humanity was counting on exactly that response. 2 years after the invasion began, humanity was no longer the same species. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the bridge of the Unbroken, humanity's first interstellar warship, watching the final preparations for Operation Lazarus. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had known nothing but war for 2 years. These weren't the same humans the Hegemony had first encountered. These were survivors, forged in the crucible of near extinction, trained by desperation and driven by a cold anger that never went away. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her communications officer announced. Lieutenant Park had been a college student when the war began. Now she coordinated attacks across light years with the same casual competence other people use to order coffee. Chen nodded. Signal all units. Operation Lazarus is a go. Below ground, in the vast manufacturing complex that had once been NORAD, Dr. Elena Vasquez watched her life's work come to fruition. The facility now housed the most advanced weapons laboratory in human history, built entirely from salvaged alien technology and human innovation. Quantum torpedo production is at full capacity, her assistant reported. We're manufacturing 50 units per day now. Vasquez smiled grimly. The torpedoes were her masterpiece, human quantum physics combined with hegemony energy systems, creating weapons that could tear holes in space-time itself. The aliens had the knowledge to build such things, but they'd never bothered. They'd never needed to. What about the new ships? She asked. The Lazarus-class vessels are performing beyond specifications. Faster than hegemony ships, more maneuverable, and equipped with adaptive shielding that learns from each hit. Humanity had done something the hegemony had never seen. They'd taken alien technology and made it better. Not just copied it, but improved it in ways that showed a fundamental difference in thinking. Where the hegemony built for reliability and mass production, humans built for creativity and adaptation. Where aliens designed weapons systems that followed predictable patterns, humans created technology that could think, learn, and evolve during combat. The first test came at the Battle of Mars. Commander Vex Thai was confident as his fleet of 60 ships approached the Red Planet. Intelligence reports suggested the humans had established some kind of research facility there, but it was lightly defended. This would be a simple cleanup operation. He was spectacularly wrong. The first surprise came when his sensors detected ships that shouldn't exist. 12 vessels, sleek and deadly, moving in formations that seemed to dance around his heavier hegemony. Vessels. Their design was unlike anything in the alien database, human engineering combined with technology that surpassed the hegemony's own. All ships, engage the human vessels, Vex Thai ordered. Standard attack formation. That was his second mistake. The human ships didn't fight like anything he'd encountered before. They moved like living things, coordinating attacks with a precision that seemed impossible. When his ships fired, the human vessels seemed to know where the shots would be before they were fired. The unbroken Chen's flagship demonstrated human tactical thinking in action. Instead of trading shots at long range like civilized warships, it did something insane. It accelerated directly toward the largest hegemony vessel, spinning and weaving through weapons fire that should have destroyed it. "Admiral, we're taking heavy fire," Park reported. "Keep us on course," Chen replied calmly. "Vasquez, are the new weapons ready?" "Quantum torpedoes armed and ready," came the reply from the weapons bay. The Unbroken closed to point-blank range with the hegemony flagship and unleashed a full spread of quantum torpedoes. The alien ship's shields, designed to stop conventional energy weapons, were completely useless against weapons that attacked the fabric of space itself. The flagship simply ceased to exist, torn apart at the quantum level. Around the battlefield, 11 other human ships were demonstrating the same deadly combination of impossible maneuvers and devastating weapons. Hegemony vessels that had conquered 1,000 worlds found themselves outgunned by ships built in hidden factories by a species that had been declared primitive. Captain Jin Watanabe, commanding the destroyer Retribution, found himself facing 3 hegemony cruisers at once. His ship was smaller, faster, and crewed by people who had lost everything and wanted payback. "Engineering, give me everything the engines have," he ordered. "Sir, if we push the fusion reactors past Redline, we'll risk a containment breach," his chief engineer warned. "Then we better make this quick," Watanabe replied. The Retribution dove between the 3 alien ships, firing quantum torpedoes and railgun rounds in all directions. 2 of the cruisers exploded immediately. The third managed to land a hit that cracked the human ship's hull and sent atmosphere venting into space. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, damage control reported. "We're losing life support." Watanabe looked at his bridge crew. They were all young, all survivors, all carrying the same expression of grim determination. "We came here to make them pay," he said. "Let's finish the job." The Retribution's final attack was a ramming run at maximum velocity, its remaining quantum. Torpedoes set to detonate on impact. The explosion took out not just the third cruiser, but two more hegemony ships that had been moving to support it. When the battle ended 4 hours later, the alien fleet was gone. 60 hegemony ships had been destroyed by 12 human vessels. Only 6 human ships survived, but they had achieved something unprecedented: total victory against overwhelming odds. The battle's effects rippled across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication could carry the news. Species that had been enslaved for centuries heard whispers of impossible human victories. Worlds that had accepted hegemony rule began to remember what rebellion felt like. But the real shock came when the humans didn't stop with defense. "Admiral," Chen's voice reached every hegemony listening post when she broadcast from the bridge of the Unbroken, now orbiting the liberated Mars colony. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet. To all hegemony forces, you came to our world and killed our people. You thought we were weak because our technology was primitive. You thought we would surrender because every other species had." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "You were wrong. We don't surrender. We don't forgive. And we don't forget. For every human city you destroyed, we will liberate 10 worlds. For every human life you took, we will free 1,000 slaves." The transmission continued on frequencies that reached across the galaxy. "To all enslaved species, humanity stands with you. We will teach you to fight. We will share our weapons. We will show you that the hegemony can be beaten because we just did it." In his command center, Vexthai reviewed the battle recordings for the 100th time. The human tactics made no sense according to established military doctrine. Their technology was impossible according to known physics. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves was unprecedented according to psychological profiles. "These humans," he reported to the Hegemony Council, "do not behave like any species we have encountered. They appear to become more dangerous when threatened with extinction. They treat death in battle not as failure, but as an acceptable outcome in service of larger goals." He paused, struggling to put his thoughts into words that his superiors would understand. "They do not fight to preserve themselves. They fight to destroy us. There is a difference, and it is significant." The Council's response was predictable. Deploy core fleet elements, overwhelm the humans with force they cannot possibly resist. But in her laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Vasquez was already working on humanity's next surprise. The quantum torpedo had been impressive, but it was just the beginning. Human creativity, unleashed by desperation and fury, was producing innovations that even she found frightening. "Show me the prototype," she told her team. They wheeled out a device that looked deceptively simple. A metal cylinder about the size of a coffin, covered in quantum field generators and stabilized by miniature fusion reactors. "It's a planet cracker," her lead engineer explained. "Quantum disruption field that can destabilize a world's core. One shot, one dead planet." Vasquez nodded slowly. She had created a weapon that could kill worlds, and she felt no guilt about it. The hegemony had started this war by trying to exterminate humanity. If they wanted to see what humans could build when their survival was at stake, she was happy to show them. "How many can we manufacture?" she asked. "With current resources, maybe a dozen?" "Build them all," she ordered, "and then build more. The hegemony wants to see what happens when you corner humanity. Let's give them a demonstration. They'll never forget." The galaxy was on fire, and humanity had lit the match. 3 years after the first human victories, rebellions burned on 100 worlds. Species that had been enslaved for millennia were throwing off their chains, inspired by news of impossible human victories against the mighty hegemony. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Liberator, flagship of humanity's growing fleet, watching the tactical display that showed the current state of the war. Green dots marked free worlds. Red showed hegemony territory. The colors were shifting daily now, red turning to green as world after world declared independence. "Intelligence report from Proxima Sector," her aide announced. "The Rigelians have successfully overthrown their hegemony governor. They're requesting human military advisors." Chen nodded. It was the same story everywhere. Species that had forgotten how to fight were remembering, taught by human tacticians who had learned warfare the hard way. The hegemony's greatest strength, their vast empire, was becoming their weakness as rebellion spread faster than they could contain it. But Chen knew the real battle was yet to come. "What's the status on the core fleets?" she asked. "Long range. Sensors show massive hegemony fleet movements toward the galactic core. Our estimates put their force at over 3,000 ships, including their most advanced vessels." Chen smiled grimly. The hegemony was finally taking humanity seriously, bringing their elite forces out of mothballs for the first time in centuries. They were confident that primitive humans couldn't stand against their finest weapons and most experienced commanders. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. Captain Jin Watanabe commanded the destroyer Unbroken Now, his third ship to bear that name. The first two had been destroyed in battles that became legend among human forces. Like many of humanity's best officers, he treated ships as expendable tools and death as an occupational hazard. "Sir, we're receiving tactical data from Fleet. Command," his communications officer reported. "Operation Thunderstrike is authorized." Watanabe studied the battle plan on his screen. It was insane, suicidal, and brilliant. Everything humanity had become good at. While the hegemony was massing their core fleets for a decisive battle, humanity would strike at the heart of their empire. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're about to attempt something that will either end this war or get us all killed. Probably both." He paused, thinking of his family who had died in the bombardment of Tokyo. The hegemony thinks they know how we fight. They think they can predict our tactics because they've been studying us for 3 years. They're about to learn that humans don't repeat themselves. We evolve. The human fleet that jumped into the hegemony core system was unlike anything that had ever existed in galactic history. 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and alien technology, crewed by veterans who had survived battles that should have been impossible. But the real surprise wasn't the ships. It was how they fought. Commander Vexthai, now supreme military commander of all hegemony forces, watched in growing horror as the human fleet demonstrated tactics that violated every principle of space warfare he understood. The human ships didn't form traditional battle lines. Instead, they moved like a school of fish, each vessel responding to threats and opportunities with perfect coordination. When his forces concentrated fire on one ship, the others would swarm the attackers. When he tried to surround them, they would scatter and regroup in formations he couldn't predict. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to treat their own ships as ammunition. Human vessels would ram hegemony ships without hesitation, their crews sacrificing themselves to destroy enemy vessels worth 10 times their own cost. "This is impossible," he muttered, watching another human destroyer ram itself into a hegemony battlecruiser. "They fight like they don't care if they die." His aide, a young officer who had never seen combat before the human war, looked confused. "Sir, shouldn't self-preservation be their primary instinct?" Vexthai turned to stare at him. "You still don't understand what we're fighting, do you? These aren't soldiers trying to survive a battle. These are extermination survivors trying to prevent genocide. They're not fighting for victory, they're fighting for species survival." The human fleet's most devastating weapon wasn't their quantum torpedoes or their adaptive shielding. It was their complete willingness to die if it advanced their cause. Every human ship was effectively a suicide weapon that happened to have sophisticated targeting systems. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commanded the heavy cruiser Vengeance in the thick of the battle. Her ship had taken damage that would have forced any sane commander to retreat, but sanity was a luxury humanity had given up years ago. "Engineering, how are our engines?" she called out over the sound of alarms and emergency lighting. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before the fusion reactor goes critical," came the reply. "Perfect," Rodriguez said. "Navigation, plot a course for that hegemony command ship. Maximum velocity." Her bridge crew didn't question the order. They'd all been fighting for 3 years, and they all knew how this would end. The only question was how much damage they could do before it happened. "All hands, abandon ship," Rodriguez announced. "Escape pods launching in 60 seconds. Anyone who wants to see Earth again, get moving." She stayed on the bridge as her crew evacuated, manually steering the dying ship toward its target. The hegemony command vessel tried to evade, but Rodriguez had anticipated that. Her final course correction put the Vengeance on a collision trajectory that couldn't be avoided. "See you in hell," she said to the alien commander, just before impact. The explosion took out not just the command ship, but 3 escort vessels, and the communication relay that coordinated the entire hegemony defense. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human ships sacrificed themselves for tactical advantage. Each loss hurt, but each sacrifice bought victory for the survivors. But the battle's turning point came when humanity revealed their newest weapon. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent 2 years perfecting the quantum disruptor, a weapon that could tear holes in space-time itself. Now, deployed on the experimental ship Prometheus, it was about to change the nature of warfare forever. "Target the largest concentration of enemy ships," Admiral Chen ordered from the Liberator's bridge. "Quantum disruptor charged and ready," came the reply from Prometheus. The weapon fired once, creating a sphere of twisted space that expanded to engulf 50 hegemony vessels. They didn't explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by forces that violated the known laws of physics. The psychological effect was immediate. Hegemony ships that had fought with disciplined precision began to panic and retreat. Their crews had never seen weapons that could erase matter from existence. "All ships pursue and destroy," Chen ordered. "Don't let any of them escape to report what they've seen." The battle ended with the complete destruction of the hegemony core fleet. 3,000 of their finest ships reduced to debris and quantum echoes by 200 human vessels. It was a victory so complete that news of it reached the Galactic Rim before the Hegemony Council could suppress the reports. But the real impact was psychological. For the first time in their history, the hegemony had suffered a defeat so total that their own people began to question their invincibility. On enslaved worlds across the galaxy, the whispers grew louder. The mighty hegemony, rulers of the stars, for millennia had been crushed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. If humans could do the impossible, what else might be possible? Rebellions that had smoldered for generations burst into open revolution. Species that had accepted slavery as inevitable began to remember what freedom meant. The hegemony's vast empire, held together by fear and the belief in alien invincibility, began to crumble. In his private chambers, Commander Vex Thai studied recordings of human communications intercepted during the battle. He was trying to understand an enemy that defied every model of behavior his species had developed. "They don't just fight wars," he said to himself, playing back Captain Rodriguez's final transmission. "They fight until there's nothing left to fight for. They will never stop." For the first time in his long military career, Vex Thai felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be intimidated, and couldn't be defeated by conventional means. Humanity had shown the galaxy something that had never existed before, a species that became more dangerous the closer it came to extinction. Every loss made them harder. Every defeat taught them new tactics. Every sacrifice inspired greater resistance. The hegemony had ruled through overwhelming force and the certainty of victory. But humans had introduced something new to galactic warfare. The certainty that some species would rather die fighting than live as slaves, and that certainty was spreading to every world the hegemony controlled, carried by whispers of human victories and the impossible dream that even the mighty could fall. The galaxy was learning what Earth already knew, that some fights were worth having, no matter the odds. 5 years after the first alien ships appeared over Earth, the hegemony was dying. President Maria Santos stood in the rebuilt United Nations building in New Geneva, looking out at representatives from 300 worlds. Species that had been enslaved for millennia sat beside humans who had known freedom for barely 5 years. Together, they were writing the charter for something that had never existed. A galactic government based on freedom instead of fear. The war was almost over. But the hardest decision still lay ahead. The hegemony core worlds have surrendered, Admiral Chen reported to the assembly. Their remaining fleets are scattered, their leadership is in hiding, and their empire has collapsed. We've won. The chamber erupted in celebration, roars, chirps. Clicks and sounds that had no human equivalent as hundreds of species expressed joy in their own ways. But Santos raised her hand for silence. "We've won the war," she said. "Now we have to win the peace, and that might be harder." The problem was simple. What do you do with the species that had enslaved half the galaxy? In the months since the hegemony's military collapse, human forces had occupied their core worlds. What they found there challenged everything they thought they knew about their enemies. The hegemony wasn't a race of conquerors. They were bureaucrats who had inherited an empire built by their ancestors thousands of years ago. Dr. James Wright, now humanity's leading expert on alien cultures, presented his findings to the assembly. The current generation of hegemony leadership has never known anything but ruling over others, he explained. They genuinely believed they were bringing order to chaos, civilization to primitives. In their minds, slavery was a gift they gave to lesser species. "That doesn't excuse genocide," said Representative Kayla, a survivor from one of the worlds the hegemony had sterilized. Wright nodded. "No, it doesn't. But it means we're not dealing with monsters. We're dealing with people who were raised to believe that domination was their right and their duty." The debate that followed would determine the future of galactic civilization. Some representatives called for the complete extermination of all hegemony species. Others wanted them enslaved as punishment for their crimes. A few argued for forgiveness and integration. President Santos listened to all sides before speaking. 5 years ago, we were given a choice: submit or die. We chose a third option. Today, we have the same choice to make about them. We can choose revenge, we can choose mercy, or we can choose something else entirely. She paused, thinking of the billions who had died in the war. I propose we choose justice. The trials began 6 months later. Commander Vex Thai found himself in a courtroom on New Geneva, facing judges from 50 different worlds. He was the highest-ranking hegemony officer to be captured alive, and his trial would set the precedent for how the galaxy dealt with war criminals. The prosecutor was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the same woman who had designed the weapons that destroyed his fleets. She presented evidence of genocide, slavery, and cultural destruction spanning thousands of years. The list of crimes seemed endless. But when Vexthai finally spoke in his defense, his words surprised everyone. "I do not ask for forgiveness," he said, his translated voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "What my people did was wrong. I can see that now, though I could not see it then. We told ourselves we were bringing order to chaos, but we were bringing only death." He looked directly at President Santos, who sat in the observer's gallery. "Your species taught us something we had forgotten, that some things are worth dying for. You fought not just for your own freedom, but for the freedom of species you had never met. That is unprecedented. The trial lasted 3 months. In the end, Vexthai was sentenced to life in prison, but not on any human world. He would spend his remaining years on a rehabilitation colony, working to repair some of the damage the hegemony had caused. Justice, Santos explained to reporters, isn't just punishment. It's also the chance for redemption. But the real test of humanity's character came when they faced the hegemony's final offer. Ambassador Kethvar, the same crystal being who had first threatened Earth, now knelt in the ruins of the hegemony capital. Around him, the remaining council members offered humanity everything: technology that could make them immortal, resources to rebuild Earth 1,000 times over, entire star systems that contained more wealth than human civilization had ever imagined. All they asked in return was to be allowed to live. "You could rule the galaxy," Kethvar said to President Santos during their final meeting. "Your military is supreme, your technology is advanced, your people have proven they cannot be defeated. Take our place, become the new hegemony." Santos looked at the alien who had started this war with his arrogance and threats. He looked smaller now, diminished by defeat and the knowledge of what his people had done. "No," she said simply. "No?" Kethavar's crystal form flickered with confusion. "You refuse ultimate power?" "We refuse to become you," Santos replied. "Humanity didn't fight this war to replace one empire with another. We fought it to end the idea that any species should rule over others. What humanity built instead was something the galaxy had never seen: a confederation of equals. The Galactic Liberation Alliance had no emperor, no ruling species, no central authority that could impose its will on others. Instead, it was a network of free worlds that chose to cooperate because cooperation benefited everyone. Species that had been enemies for millennia found themselves working together on projects that helped all of them. Technology was shared freely. Trade flowed without tribute or taxes to distant overlords. For the first time in galactic history, civilization was built on cooperation instead of conquest. Dr. Vasquez, now in charge of the Alliance's research division, oversaw projects that would have been impossible under the hegemony. Former slaves worked alongside their former masters, united by the simple goal of making life better for everyone. "It's remarkable," she told Santos during one of their weekly meetings. "When you stop spending all your resources on conquest and control, you have amazing amounts of energy left over for actually solving problems." The Alliance's first major project was the restoration of worlds the hegemony had destroyed. Species that had been declared extinct were brought back using genetic samples preserved in hidden archives. Planets that had been strip-mined were restored to habitability using technology that combined the best ideas from hundreds of worlds. But perhaps the most important project was education. Admiral Chen, now retired from military service, established schools on every Alliance world where young beings from different species could learn together. The curriculum included not just science and mathematics, but history, including the honest history of what the hegemony had done and why it had fallen. "We can't prevent another empire from rising," she told her first class of students. "But we can make sure everyone remembers what empires cost and why freedom is worth fighting for." The final scene of humanity's war for galactic freedom took place not on a battlefield, but in a small cafe on New Geneva. President Santos, now retired, sat across from Kethvar, who had been released from prison and now worked as a cultural liaison for the Alliance. "I still don't understand," the alien said, sipping a beverage that would have been impossible during the war. Coffee beans from Earth, served in cups made by hegemony artisans who had chosen to stay and help rebuild. "Understand what?" Santos asked. "Your species could have taken revenge, could have enslaved us as we enslaved others, could have ruled the galaxy as we did. Instead, you chose to free everyone, including us." "Why?" Santos smiled, thinking of all the humans who had died to make this moment possible. Captain Torres, who had sacrificed herself to prove the hegemony could be hurt, Captain Rodriguez, who had died to save her crew, the billions who had perished in the bombardment of Earth, whose deaths had taught humanity that some things were worth any price. Because, she said finally, someone has to be better than what came before. Someone has to prove that power doesn't have to corrupt. That strength doesn't have to be used for domination. If we had become another empire, then everyone who died in this war would have died for nothing. She stood up, looking out the window at a street where humans walked alongside beings from 100 different worlds, all of them free. The stars were warned that an empire chose to test humanity. They learned that some species don't just survive extinction, they use it as motivation to build something better. Kethvar nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Your species didn't start the war for galactic freedom, he said, but you made sure you finished it. Santos smiled. That's what humans do. We don't start fights, but when someone forces us into one, we make damn sure we end it properly. Outside, the sun set over New Geneva, casting long shadows across a world that had been burned and rebuilt, destroyed and reborn. In the gathering dusk, representatives from hundreds of worlds prepared for another day of building something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on the radical idea that freedom was the birthright of every thinking being. The war was over. The real work was just beginning, and for the first time in galactic history, that work was being done by free people, working together by choice rather than compulsion, building a future that belonged to everyone.